You're listening to the Healthy Creative Ministry podcast with Matt Curtis. This is the podcast that helps you take your creative ministry from wherever you are today to healthy and effective.
Are missed deadlines just a part of working with creatives? This is a question that typically comes to me from a ministry leader, not a creative. This conversation happens when somebody says, "Hey, Matt, we're having trouble. Our creatives just aren't hitting the deadlines that need to get hit. And we're struggling because it makes us feel like we can't trust them. So if I submit a project to them, I just don't know if they're going to give me the project in the time that I need it to get done. So what am I supposed to do with that? Is this just a part of working with creatives?" So that's the context where I hear this. And my short answer to that is no, this is not part of working with creatives. And if it is a part of working with creatives, that means that there is a problem that needs to be solved. Because my perspective would be that it is not acceptable for creatives to miss deadlines, period. There are a few exceptions that I'm going to walk through here briefly, but usually missed deadlines are an indicator of a larger problem. And I find that there are two ways that churches go with this. They either go, and this is the more rare case, this person is missing deadlines, they're fired. That is the more abnormal of the approaches that churches take, because I don't know many churches that are gung-ho about firing people, just to be honest. Typically, churches will take the other approach. The other approach is, well, I guess creatives are just difficult to work with. Let's marginalize them and keep them on staff because it's harder to get rid of them. Those are the two options that I have seen played out in the church over many, many years in a lot of different contexts. In churches that I consult with, that I've been on staff with, it's just the typical posture of churches to accept a marginalized role on the team as opposed to having the hard conversations. I think that part of this is actually solved by what I want to talk through today in terms of what I call the 4 creative cores. This language framework is extremely powerful at actually addressing problems in the creative space driven by non-creatives. There's this interesting barrier that exists between the creative space and the non-creative space. And what I find is that many who are non-creatives think that the creative world is just super abstract and it's real artsy-fartsy and everybody is just sitting around talking about what fonts they like and their favorite color for this season, and is it in or not. But it's all driven out of personal preference, and it's all driven pretty much in an opinionated manner. There are no absolutes. It's not like theology, where we can go read a passage and then translate the Greek or the Hebrew, and we really get down to the root of it. You know, we got a systematic theology that we can check. There are some absolutes. It's not that kind of a space. And so sometimes what we do is we just sort of give up. We begin the conversation with a posturing. We say, this is my approach, and I'm the pastor, so you should listen. And then the creative says, but that's not right. And you're like, what even is right? Because you guys are just opinion machines. And it becomes this really complicated dialogue, and we don't get any further. And so this language, the 4 creative cores, actually breaks down the barrier, and it empowers the non-creative to begin having conversations with the creative where both can benefit. It bridges the gap between the two worlds. So I know you're probably, when you hear the 4 creative cores is 4 words: systems, skills, heart, and imagination. If you've been with the podcast for a long time, you've heard these things. The first either 4 or 5 episodes were really dedicated to what these things are. And so if you're intrigued by it, I have a link that I'm going to put in the show notes, and it's going to unpack for you what the 4 creative cores are. All 4 of the podcast episodes are embedded in the page, so you have everything you need. But those 4 words have the power to give you options when there's a problem in your creative ministry. So if you're the creative, this works for you too. This isn't just boss language. This is language for you to be able to dig deeper into some of the nuanced things that are happening in your department, in your own ministry, in your own work as a creative. So let me back up a little bit, and I want to tell you about the things that I see as reasons as to why a missed deadline can happen, and it's not the end of the world. If it happens in these situations, you know what? It happens. I do believe you can prepare for them, but here they are. So I consider these to be unforeseen circumstances. You have a crisis. Something wildly unexpected happens. The roof of your church collapses. Yeah, okay. Unforeseen. That's a crisis. A natural disaster. When I was serving at a church in the high desert in Southern California, we had a wildfire run through our area. And I mean, it was devastating. It was massive. It hopped over the freeway, which was the primary artery out of the area. It was a really, really big deal. A natural disaster can mess up your ability to be punctual on your communications. Health problems. Someone on your team has a severe health problem. This could be the creative. We had a situation where I was designing a series graphic and my wife went into labor way earlier than she was supposed to. Okay, that's a health problem. Hey, boss, I'm on my way to the hospital. I'm not going to get that graphic done. And then the last one is tragedies. Something happens that's very dramatic, that's very close to your organization, or maybe even close to the people in your organization. It could be traveling somewhere and an event happens, a situation. We had some stuff happen not too far from us that was not great. And it would go into that category. There were a lot of people that were really shook up about it. Someone on your staff team passes away. That's a tragedy. That's gonna mess up the day-to-day operation of things. And that's okay. So those are those things these are unforeseen circumstances. You can't prevent them from happening. They're out of people's control. Now, I would say, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes as well, there is a way for you to build a plan today outside of crisis, outside of disaster, etc. You can have plans that actually speak to these problems before they happen. Okay, so if our designer goes down, what is our backup plan? You can do that if you wanted to. We had one for natural disasters and like crisis communication stuff. We didn't have anything for if a designer goes down or stuff like that. But maybe that's helpful for you. Maybe that's helpful for you to get ahead of that and to build a plan. I do think it's wise for us to have plans. And then there are churches in areas where this stuff is common. So in Southern California, we had wildfires and we had earthquakes. We did not have a tornado response plan because we did not have tornadoes. If you live in an area that has tornadoes, it would be wise of you to build a plan. What happens if that happens? So those are the unforeseen circumstances. When these things happen, just move past it. You missed a deadline, okay, because of some major crisis. But really the conversation is circling around, what if we do have missed deadlines, but they aren't those things? What if this is just like I submitted my project in time and I don't have my project on time? That's a problem. This is really where the 4 creative cores comes into the conversation. And I want to walk through this scenario using this framework because I think it'll reveal to you just the impact that it can make in each of your situations. So we're going to start with this dialogue. Hey, I just wanted to have a conversation. You missed the deadline for this project. Okay, creative now. Yeah, man, I'm so sorry. I forgot about the project. I couldn't find the details and, I didn't remember that we had to have it done. Okay, if this is the conversation, if it goes this way, whether that be one time or repeatable, because a lot of times these are repeated things. There's something broken somewhere repeatedly. Okay, you need better systems in this scenario. If you are losing projects and you are forgetting details of projects, it means that your systems are broken. It means that you're not doing a good job of organizing your projects. Maybe you're not writing them down. Maybe your intake system is broken. There are many times for me where I was walking through the hallway and somebody would say, hey, Matt, I have a project. I need your help. Okay. And then we have a conversation about it and then I leave. Well, so does the information that they just shared with me. Now, the reason is because the hallway conversation was not an effective intake for me. That was not how projects should come into my systems. And truth be told, those projects didn't come into my systems because I forgot. As soon as they told me about it, I moved on and they assumed that I was working on it. In this conversation now, I forgot about that project. My response would be, if I'm in this conversation, did you email it to me? Did you fill out a paper and hand it to me? I'm trying to remember how this happened. Where did you give me the information? And then whoever it is in this conversation would have to say, well, I talked to you about it in the hallway. Now, at this point, it's too late. We've already missed the deadline. The project is a problem. So we're going to have to figure out a crisis, response to this. How do we figure out how do we solve this problem? How do we equip them with what they need quickly? But for the future, we need better clarity on systems. And so for me, in this example, I learned that I never accepted these conversations at face value. Every time, in every conversation, sometimes even at the very beginning, I would interrupt and say, hey, just heads up. I need you to email me this or I'm going to forget. Full disclosure, I will not remember this because this is not a part of my system. No problem. I'll let you know, but I just want to fill you in here. Perfect. I'm happy to have the conversation. Believe me, no problem. But big problem if this is the only way that you're going to deliver the information. And so what we're discovering here is if you forget about a project or you forget details, it means there's something broken. I always like to think of this as the input side of things. There's the clarity sides of things. There's the distribution side of things. Where does this get assigned? Those kinds of things tends to be project management or tracking or something. And then the last one is delivery. What does it look like for us to actually execute on the project? Those different pieces of systems really are the places where problems show up and where things break down. It's in one of those 4 areas. So I would encourage you, if this is where things are at, look into those 4 areas. Look into your systems and begin getting a sense as to where specifically this thing is falling through the cracks. I have managed my workload very effectively using a yellow pad. So one of the things I don't want you to hear is you have to have a super high-end project management system that's all digital and all online and all that stuff in order to be effective. It's not true. You don't. But you do need a system that lets you not have this conversation. And so you're going to have to go through and you're going to have to analyze, where are my systems working? Where are they falling short? The main reason I went to a digital system was actually to address one of these unforeseen circumstances, which was health problems. What do I do if we have a health problem in my family and I'm pulled away from my work? So in the instance of me not being able to get the series graphics done on time, the other designer that I was working with could hop straight in because we had a project management system. He was able to take over, did a great job taking it to the finish line for me. Huge help. So in some cases, your systems can actually address even some of the unforeseen circumstances. But if you're forgetting about the project or losing details, you have a systems problem. All right, reset the conversation. Hey, so you missed a deadline. Now the creative's response, yeah, I can't figure out how to accomplish this solution. Okay, if this is the conversation, if you are trying to accomplish something and it feels like it's just beyond your abilities, this means you have a skills problem. And I don't mean you're terrible at everything about skills. I mean the specific solution that you're trying to implement is beyond your skill level. What happens over time is ministry leaders may continue to ask you for things that are beyond your skills. That's a problem over time because it means that you will constantly be doing projects that you're not capable of executing in a timely manner. When you have a project that's beyond your skills, it doesn't mean you can't learn to do it. It means that the timeline has to include the time it takes you to learn to do it. So if you ask me to design you something right now, I will be able to do it very, very quickly. Why? Because I've been doing design work since 2000. I've been in this for a long time. I know a ton of shortcuts. I know a ton of strategies. I know a ton of places to find assets quickly. I know how to design really fast. If you ask me to rebuild your engine on your car, I think I could do it, but it is not going to be quickly. And so if you said, I want you to rebuild my engine by next weekend, I can try, but I'm going to spend so much time doing research that the job's just going to go slowly. So when you hear this, that it's a skills problem, I don't want you to think you're incompetent or you're inept, or if you're on the ministry side, the person that you're working with is incompetent. That's not actually what I mean at all. I mean that they haven't yet applied this skill in practice before. In some cases, they've never learned this skill. And so I'm not questioning the ability to learn. I'm saying they don't own this skill set yet. Now, there's something in that statement as well. If you're constantly running into this problem, then maybe there is a skills issue in terms of maybe graphic design's not a great fit for you. Maybe copywriting isn't something you should invest in. Maybe web design's just not the right industry for you to be in. because there are people who are misfit in the roles that they're in. And so skills can reveal if we are actually in a good position or not. Obviously, there's other layers. Do you enjoy what you're doing? Do you feel passionate about it? Are you a good problem solver? There's a lot of layers to it. But skills can be a reason to step out of something. I'm just not good enough at it. That was a piece of where I felt, even with my own design, I needed a break. I felt like there were all these trends that were moving in a direction that I just didn't like. And I was struggling to create stuff that I felt worked well. And so I needed a break. And so I stepped out of design for a little bit. God was gracious and moved me into more developing leadership and management kinds of skill sets. And as I re-entered into design, I was able to really kind of get it a lot differently. And I think that other perspective and that time off really helped me. So maybe that's a piece of where you're at with skills. But when it comes to this original question, if we're missing the deadline because of skills, we either need to really be intentional about growing and developing. We need to take classes. We need to, maybe go back to school or look up certain tutorials. Or the other side, we need to tone our ideas down a little bit. You guys need to have less sort of wild and extreme concepts. Sometimes the work that's being asked of us just demands a lot of time. So it expresses itself like a skills issue, but really the problem is the project itself just takes a ton of time. I remember a project that we were asked to accomplish. It was a physical mural, it was a physically painted and created mural. It took us 2 days, me and the communications director. We were down at this board for 2 days, masking out the things that they wanted masked out. The measurements took forever. We couldn't project on it because it was outside and it was really sunny. And so everything was just wildly inefficient and slow. So sometimes the project scope that's being asked of us is just way beyond the deadline's parameters as well. And so in those situations, you either need to hire a professional who's faster, maybe you need to have even more manpower, more people working on it, or maybe the project just isn't feasible to get done in time. And so that's a little bit of what skills looks like. All right, reset the conversation again. Hey, you missed a deadline. The creative's response. Yeah, I have a reason, and it's your fault. You did something wrong on your end. Okay, well now the response is you got to change your attitude. All right, so now we're talking about heart. Heart is a really interesting one because the motivations here aren't always visible. And so the way I tend to look at it is if your systems don't seem like the problem, if your skills don't seem like the problem, and if your imagination don't seem like the problem, but there are still problems, it's time to start digging into heart. Heart is particularly tricky because I think we are pretty good at deceiving ourselves. I even think of a handful of different passages that talk about that. We don't even know our own hearts. And this becomes very problematic when we're trying to troubleshoot because if you're missing deadlines, there's a chance that there is a bit of angst brewing in these relationships. There were seasons for us as a team where there were other ministry teams that we worked with, different ministry departments, that we liked more than others. And one of the things that I really had to focus on trying to course correct for us was that we didn't have favorites. And what I mean by that is we didn't do better for some teams and worse for others. Heart expresses itself this way often in creative ministry. We've had a ministry leader that is a micromanager and is way over the top. We've had a ministry leader that is very unkind in the way they deliver feedback. We have a ministry leader who never gives us enough time to get the work done, but they always have a reason as to why it's our fault. So that kind of stuff, it builds a reputation, and it really can make your heart hardened towards that person, towards that ministry, towards that relationship, whatever specific target that is for you. But that's a real problem. And so heart sometimes does come out. It's, so-and-so, they're just so hard to work with. Okay, that's the default reason as to why you missed a deadline. There are some other problems going on. My encouragement always here, obviously the surface levels, change your attitude, but it's so hard to do on your own. But one of the ways that I've found to be helpful is I started asking questions, and I actually had a boss that asked the question this way: do you feel like you've done everything in your power in order to make this project a success? That for me is sort of the silver bullet question. Because what I would often find, even if I was kind of self-coaching, even if I was talking to myself about this, do I feel like I did everything? And I'd be kind of sarcastic about it. I'd say like, well, I didn't do everything. I didn't go walk over to their desk and say, where's the project? Okay, but even as I said that, it sort of became obvious to me, like, yeah, I literally could have done that. Like I could have stood up from my desk rather than waiting. I could have gotten up and I could have walked over there and I could have said, hey, I don't have content still. Is there something I can do to help? Do you want me to write a rough draft? Do you want me to talk to somebody else about it? Like, what does it look like for me to get content or to help you get content? And so heart usually is when we sit back and blame other people pretty quickly. It's not a good thing. And ultimately, heart can undermine everything else. If you have great ideas with imagination, which we'll talk about in a minute, your skills are just on point. You can get done anything that they ask you to do. Systems are super dialed. None of that matters if heart is off. It really doesn't. And I would actually go as far as to say, if your heart is in a good spot, you can learn the other ones. You can build better systems. Look at the resources on my page. I got a ton of resources to help you build systems. Or call me. Let's build systems together. Skills. I've mentored new designers as they come on the team, both in my job and also now with my business. I can do these coaching calls and build a regiment to help build your skills. Super attainable. I can recommend things like Skillshare or YouTube University, as they call it. Like there's all sorts of places where you can develop your skills. Imagination. I got a ton of ways to help you grow and build your imagination. Man, but heart is tricky because that's your problem. That's my problem. That's not something, I can't manage your heart for you. You got to buy into that. As we go through using these 4 creative cores, this is one of those areas that begins to get unearthed. And so I would encourage you, as you go through these things, consider this with heart. Remember, this is real personal. You have the ability to derail a lot of other successful things by the way that you act. And a lot of the way that expresses itself in these conversations is when you're quick to blame other people. And then we're going to wipe the conversation one more time. The last of the 4 creative cores here, imagination. Okay, you missed a deadline. The creative now, I just can't come up with anything for this. Okay, the solution here, you got to find some sources of inspiration, or you got to bring more people into the project. So what this tends to look like, there are people who are not creative idea people. They're not originators. They're refiners. There's a lot of different kind of ways that the creative expresses itself. And one of the things that I think is very dangerous, and this is I think this is part of why churches struggle with creative ministry often. I was going to say it's uncommon. I might go as far as to say it's just not possible to find one person who is all things. You can't be all things in the creative process. You just can't. There's too much that goes in to the different phases of the creative process. I even think of this with the 4 creative cores. Somebody who's good at systems, that's awesome. That's like administrative skill, an administrative gift. But then somebody who's like an artistic, that's the skill side. Okay. Tell me how many artists you've met who are like punctual and like have their systems dialed in. I don't know many. I was an art major and I didn't meet many. I felt like I was more administrative as a design major, and I felt like I didn't belong with a lot of the art majors. So, systems and skills sometimes feel like they're hard to find in the same person. Then what about heart? Ooh, heart's difficult. Sometimes the systems people are like, look, you play with my systems well, or I'm not your friend. They're like the system police. Or the skills police. They're like, look, your ideas are pretty bad, so I'm better than you. Okay, well, that's a problem. And then you have your imagination people. Oh, man, doesn't that cloud just look like a dragon? What are you talking about? I was at lunch with a friend, and I was looking down at the patterns on the tile. I'm like, isn't that cool how the patterns on the tile work together? And he said, Matt, I have been to this restaurant so many times, and I have never once looked at the floor here, ever. It never even occurred to me. So what you're saying to me is it's brand new. It's a completely new revelation. Never even thought about it. Okay. So I'm saying all of that because everybody can't be all of these things. And so in this situation of imagination, this tends to be the one where it's very needed, but it's also kind of an intangible one for many in the process of, like, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want you to serve in creative ministry, chances are it's because of your skills. That would be my guess. The second one would be because of your heart. Systems is kind of unknown, and imagination is like, I don't know. I mean, I like the way you painted the colors in your house, so you'd be great as a creative. Well, okay, that's not churning out ideas every month, or coming up with new series graphics every time that are compelling. It's just a different skill set. And so finding sources of inspiration is one way you could do this. There's tons of different resources. I'll link a couple of them. There's one called Dribble. There's one called Behance, which is part of Adobe's suite. Pinterest obviously has a lot of different things. So I'll list a couple things here that are helpful places for you to begin getting inspiration. But the other here, bring more people into the project. Find somebody in your life who's terrible at systems, but man, they got crazy ideas. It's okay to have more people in the conversation. And for the team of one, because I know that there's a lot of churches that have a single person navigating communications, find somebody that can volunteer in this way. Find somebody, and all you do is bring them in for creative ideas. Find somebody that you can go to lunch with and just say, hey, we got 5 series coming up over the next 6, 8, 10 months, whatever. Like, this is the rest of the year. You got any ideas here? Like, can I just pick your brain for ideas? They would love to explore these ideas, because this is creativity, in my opinion. Imagination is really where creativity just runs. I'll give you a crazy example. I've shared this before. I don't know if I've shared it on the podcast or other contexts, but when I was in college, I served in the Student Missionary Union, and I pitched an idea for our missions conference. I love missions, super bought in, and I really wanted to help get the attention of the kids on campus. Because it's a bunch of students, they look at it as like a 5-day weekend. We'll just take the weekend off, go out of town and whatever. I wanted to change that. And the way I wanted to get their attention is I wanted to have a stampede on campus. There was this long street that kind of ran through. I went to Biola University, and so it would start up at the bell tower, if anybody knows this this space, start up at the bell tower, and it would finish down in front of the cafeteria by the gym area. We'd have giraffes, we'd have elephants, like we'd have these animals running down, and it would be controlled, there'd be people guiding them or whatever. That just seemed like such a cool idea to me, and I pitched it so many different times, and it always got shot down. That's what you want in imagination. You want these harebrained ideas that you can dream a little bit. That kind of creativity side of it, that will only happen with systems. It will only happen with skills, and it will only happen with heart. And so these are all so interdependent with each other. And so if you don't have this skill, if you don't have the systems, if you don't have the heart, if you don't have the imagination, bring other people in who do. Bring other people in that can either help you develop it, or even that you can rely on. The last example I'll give here, and then we'll wrap this week's episode. But when I was promoted to lead our creative team, really it was our communications team at that point, my previous boss was moved into a different role. And one of the things that I realized very quickly is that he was an idea generator, like he was a machine, and I was a refiner. And so what I began to discover, now that I was the one being looked to for ideas, was I don't have any ideas. I don't have nearly the number of ideas that he had. I didn't have the vision for ideas that he had, because my whole time there was focused on refining his ideas. So he would propose something, and I would say, ooh, what if we... And then I would go down a different rabbit trail, or a subtle tweak, or a minor adjustment, or sometimes we'd roll with it as is. But that partnership was incredibly effective. And when I took over the team, we lost that. And that's not a fault of me as a leader. That is a reality of me as a person. The wild ideas was really hard for me. Imagination was a struggle. And here was the bigger problem. The other people that we had on our team, they were all really optimized toward my boss's skill set. So the team was we were doing great work together, because we were built well because of a big piece of what he brought to the table. So he would feed us ideas that we could refine. I mean, that's perfect. And now all the ideas were gone. And so it was a really hard season. Now, part of that was happening in that moment was the model of ministry was changing. And so they didn't actually want me to be an idea generator. That was going to be divvied up to our different campuses. We were moving from a single location to a multi-site. And so in some senses, that was an okay problem to bring into the organization. But it's just a good expression of how these imbalances work out. So the 4 creative cores, the language really helps us uncover them. And it helps you, whether you're creative or not, begin navigating where exactly is the problem, and then what can we do to start addressing it. That's, kind of your next step. If you haven't already taken the free assessment, you should. It's at healthychurchcreatives.com. It is basically the 4 creative cores assessment where you answer the questions that are presented to you, and it will identify for you, these are the areas where you're strongest and weakest, rank them all, and then your overall team health. And the value of this is that it helps you identify where the next place is that you should invest your energy. So when I have a conversation with somebody, so Matt, we have missed deadlines. What should we do? My answer is, I have no idea what you should do. You should either invest in your systems, in your skills, in your heart, or in your imagination. But without more information, we actually can't solve the problem. And that's my charge to you as well. This is a real problem. You should not accept missed deadlines in your organization. Whether you're the designer or the boss of the designers, does not matter. This is unacceptable and should not exist within your creative ministry. Now we have the information that we need to do something about it. healthychurchcreatives.com, fill out the assessment, and you'll get a report that basically will unpack for you, this is where you're missing the mark. This is where growth is needed. Here are some ideas on how you can do that. And obviously, if you want to go deeper than this, this is a big part of what I do in my business, is I'll partner with churches as we go through this rebuilding process, and in some cases, even a very deep and acute coaching regiment that helps bring you up in the areas where you're low. I know it feels overwhelming at times when problems exist in your organization, or if your creative team just isn't quite hitting the mark. You feel like you're missing deadlines all the time and things just aren't going the way that you hope that they would be going. But wherever you are, it is possible to get to healthy. And that to me is the thing that's so encouraging. I've lived this. I have been a part of teams that were pretty dramatically unhealthy through high pressure and high tension situations. And they were very hard seasons. It was a hard stretch of time for me. But the part that's so encouraging is that we were able to come out on the other side as a healthy team that functioned so much better. And not just so that I didn't hate going to work. That's not my goal for me. That's not my goal for you. The goal is, yes, that we love what we do, but that we're doing it for the mission of the church. And when our health as a creative ministry is compromised, we're not going to help the mission either. And that is how I would answer the question, are missed deadlines just a part of working with creatives?
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Healthy Creative Ministry Podcast. This podcast is just one of the ways Lunchtime Heroes can help you build a healthy creative ministry in your church. Stay up to date on the latest by signing up for the Creative Bites email at lunchtimeheroes.co.